right now we're going to hear a very brief video from Mary Eberstadt. Mary is a writer, speaker. Many of you are familiar with her. A number of years ago now, actually, it was in God's providence planned before the October 7th attacks on Israel. There was a conference of Catholics and Jews, Philos Project, sponsored at Franciscan University of Steubenville. It just happened to be scheduled for what turned out to be a few weeks after the attack. And Mary was one of the speakers. She was one of, with Simone and others, one of the founders of the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism. And so she is going to speak about My Brother's Keeper, Catholics in the New Anti-Semitism. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My thanks to the Philos Project, to the St. John Paul II National Shrine, and to the distinguished speakers and attendees at this conference for the opportunity to join you electronically. Almost exactly 2 years ago, some of us were part of another historic conference at Franciscan University in 2023, at which the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism was launched. Its creation had been underway well before October 7th wrought devastation on the Jewish people, followed by the war in Gaza. Every Catholic who has not yet signed the mission statement of the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism can do so today by visiting the website of the Philos Project, where there's a link for signatories, and you can join many of your friends and teachers whose names are already set down there. Back in those innocent-seeming days before October 7th, as the Coalition's mission statement was being drafted, I confess to having doubted, in a simple-minded way, why a coalition of Catholics against anti-Semitism was needed. After all, wasn't it obvious how Catholics were supposed to treat our Jewish brothers and sisters? Hadn't the Holocaust shown the world where anti-Semitism leads? Isn't there a commandment about loving one another? And hadn't Nostra Aetate not only set the record straight, but been emphasized by some of the most cherished minds in the modern church? 2 years later, as anti-Semitism is metastasizing, including online, any doubt about the need to reiterate church teaching about Jews has vanished. In this closing message, I hope to distill the common cause of today's gathering into 3 points. First, alongside those leaders who have already been discussed today, let's add another to whom many serious Catholics are devoted. In 1967, 2 years after Nostra Aetate was promulgated, Venerable Fulton J. Sheen, who was then the renowned Roman Catholic Bishop of Rochester, New York, gave an address at John Fisher College, co-sponsored by the Archdiocese, the American Jewish Committee, and the local Jewish Community Council. That talk was consequential enough to receive a write-up in the New York Times. In it, the bishop observed that, quote, "Neither you Jews nor we Christians are at home in this world. We are both revolutionists, uneasy upstarts, and restive catalysts who disturb the mood and philosophies of this world." He further predicted that we will draw closer and closer together as we realize that we are both called by God to this task, unquote. This was hardly Bishop Sheen's first or only assertion of the indissoluble bond between the children of Abraham and the followers of Christ. In December 1941, in an address from Washington, D.C., delivered over the National Broadcasting Network, he said, quote, "The persecution of the Jews is not the concern of the Jews alone, but is also a Christian concern. To be anti-Semitic is to be anti-Christian," unquote. To understand just how urgently Bishop Sheen must have felt about these words, consider their context. At that moment in time, the entire nation was focused on the attack in that same month on Pearl Harbor by Imperial Japan and the declaration of war that followed it. Also that same month, as Fulton Sheen and most in the West could not have known, poison gas was first used to murder Jews en masse at the killing center of Chełmno in Nazi-occupied Poland. Yet somehow, piercing through the fog of war in that moment, Bishop Sheen saw and declared both that the Jewish people were in danger and that their persecution wasn't just a Jewish thing, but a Christian thing. Again, to be anti-Semitic is also to be anti-Christian. That same point was expressed earlier today in the opening address by George Weigel. So were related thoughts from Sister Maristella about the legacy of another beloved teacher, known above all for his pro-life work, Cardinal John O'Connor. In summary, St. John Paul the Great, Venerable Fulton Sheen, and Cardinal John O'Connor all affirmed that to hate the Jews is to hate the Christians. To hate your Jewish brother is to hate your Catholic self. And unlikely as it might have seemed before the massacres of October 7th, the West today needs to hear that message. America, especially young America, needs to hear that message. To the shock of those who stood in solidarity with our Jewish brothers and sisters, the attacks of 2023, followed by a war in the name of Israeli self-defense, have unleashed anti-Semitic warfare in critical corners of the West, on campuses, in the streets, and on social media. Some perpetrators protest that they aren't anti-Jewish, only anti-war. A word in passing about that. Catholics are heirs to a long-standing tradition of just war theory. It holds that wars committed in self-defense are justified. This does not mean that war is always justified, nor does it detract from war's horrors. Monstrosities happen in every war. That's exactly why starting one is so grave. Hamas should not have started this war. Those who cheered the brutalized captives being carried into Gaza should not have exulted in starting this war. By the standards of just war theory, those who willingly hid hostages in their homes and tormented them further are also culpable in this war. And so are some other people who are nowhere near Gaza, namely those influencers who shed crocodile tears over the war, beneath which they secretly rejoice in something else, the toxic new fumes being breathed into anti-Semitism. This brings us to a second point. I would like to speak specifically here to young tradition-minded Catholics, including those called tradies and their fellow travelers. You and your families and communities, you and the priests and religious who walk beside you, are critical to the American Church, today and to come. You are being counted on. You are being watched closely, both by those who stand with you in faith and by those who despise your faith. And for that reason, the fact that a few within the ranks of Catholic traditionalists have dirtied their hands with online anti-Semitism is a problem, not only for Jews, but for your fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. Where is this anti-Semitism circulating? In low places. In chat rooms where soy boys affect Nazi chic. In podcasts by influencers who wave the Christian flag and cynically exploit Jew hatred to increase their followers, meaning their bottom line. One such commentator broadcasts conspiratorial messages that sound as if Nancy Drew were bringing the protocols of the elders of Zion to 4chan. Another liquidates his intellectual capital to build a Jew-hating base. Some declare Christ is king as a perverted shorthand for anti-Semitism, as if the Jesus they claim to follow, born into a Jewish family and living his earthly life as a Jew, would be down with that. Anti-Semitic trolling attracts attention for the same reason that car accidents attract rubbernecking, because of sick fascination. It's not a good look for anyone, but especially for Catholics. To those young Catholics who are building the church of tomorrow, look away. Toward that end, I would like to suggest a new way for Christians especially to think about online anti-Semitism. Consider an analogy. During the past 20 or so years, there's been a moral turnaround in some places about another villain that slithers around the internet, pornography. That turnaround is important. Not long ago, there was a libertarian near consensus about pornography, insisting that it was harmless. Even most Christians didn't speak up against the stuff because they didn't want to be treated like religious freaks. What happened next? What happened next is that the laissez-faire consensus has begun to collapse. People learned that this online substance causes harm after all. Broken homes, broken romances, stunted men, corrupted children. And today, tradition-minded Christians, above all other groups, are leaders of a counterculture that understands the dangers of pornography and that fights to keep themselves and their loved ones away from it. Christians, especially those in the tradition-minded wing, should see a corollary here. Online anti-Semitism is the new pornography. It is moral pornography. And pornography it is, because, like pornography, internet anti-Semitism is mostly engaged in secretly. It delivers illicit thrills to degraded users, and its consumption embarrasses users when it comes to light, as is seen whenever people are exposed in public for spewing Jew hatred. Christians who were in the forefront of understanding that pornography causes harm should be in the forefront of opposing the moral pornography of anti-Semitism. Third, and finally, let's meditate on one single sentence in Nostra Aetate, the reason for this conference. The Church deplores hatred, persecutions, and all manifestations of anti-Semitism directed against Jews at any time and by anyone. All manifestations, at any time, by anyone, no exceptions. No amount of sophistical reasoning or online trolling escapes the judgment in those words. They mean that even if Catholics and Jews didn't have important things in common, anti-Semitism would still be off the table for Catholics. As it happens, though, we do share essential bonds. As I noted 2 years ago at that groundbreaking conference at Franciscan University, Jews love life. Those aren't just words. Israel is singular in the West for its young marriages, and Israel's birth rate is higher than any other Western country. Jews love life. Their enemies taunt them for this very fact. Is anything here sounding familiar? Christians love life too, and just as authentically. This joint love for life is a slap in the face to our common enemies: nihilistic secularism, murderous Islamicism, and socially suicidal marriage and baby rejectionism. This common bond is also reflected across the church and in Catholic teaching institutions like this one. To name another, St. Thomas University in Houston offers a master's degree in faith and culture that features Nostra Aetate in 2 classes. Other Catholic programs around the world are on offer of like mind. Anti-Semitism defies the teachings of the Church, including its most faithful leaders and representative halls of learning. In closing, to be Catholic is to believe that we will answer someday for what we've done, including for how we rose to the occasion, or didn't, of being our brother's keepers. Let's allow Venerable Fulton J. Sheen the last thought here. In that same address from 1967, quoted earlier, he also said this: "We must look upon the persecution of Jews and Christians today not as separate, unrelated causes, but involving one another in some way because both are related to God." Fellow Catholics, we should inscribe on our hearts those words and the consistent teachings by the Church of love for the people of Abraham. Thank you.